Hi everyone, this is Howard from the Ruby on Rails Decal Spring 15, and I'm going to start with a tutorial on basic models and migrations because we have been having a lot of technical difficulties with recording our lectures, and hopefully this tutorial will go at a little slower pace so that it is a little easier to digest. All right. First, I'm going to start with creating a basic Rails application. This is my folder where I just keep all my decal stuff. I'm going to create a new application by running the command Rails. New name of the application. I'm going to call it models tutorial. Okay. Run that command. It creates all these files for me. Runs bundle install. And yeah, creates all this stuff. And now I'm going to go into my models tutorial. So this is everything. So first off, I want to talk about what models are, what a database is, and like what migrations are, and like how they're all related. So you could think of a Rails application as actually two separate parts. Like one is like this kind of Ruby environment that runs and performs like a bunch of logic, right? It does like if else statements, chooses what views to render, stuff like that. But what persists the information is actually a database. And when I say persists, what I'm talking about is like, if you like spin up a Java application and you create like an object, right? Or like in Python, you run the interpreter and you create an object and you close your environment, right? And you restart it, you can't find that object again. Like once you close the environment, it's gone. What a database allows you to do is store this information in tables. And what tables are just, you could think about it as matrices, right? So what happens within your database, you have a collection of these matrices that we call tables. Each of these tables have their own name, right? And within each of the tables, you have rows and columns. The columns represent like individual attributes of the table, and a row represents a single entry in that table. So that's what a database is. And it can be completely independent of the Rails application. So let's say I decide not to use Rails anymore, right? I could switch that out for like a node thing, and that will allow you to, you still have the information while changing the kind of framework that you're using. So what models are within Ruby, that they're the abstraction to the database. They are the classes that allow you to say, hey, I want you to look up in this database, grab this information into my Ruby environment, and then allow us to do logic with Ruby code in order to like make permutations to this data. And it's these models that allow us to say, okay, I made changes and I want to push back the changes to the database. All right. So that's the general overview of models and what a database is. If to make it simpler, you could compare like a database to like a huge CSV file. All right. So first off, what I'm going to create is, or what I'm about to generate is a model, and let's call it dog. So I'm going to do Rails generate model. So this little command Rails provides us says where I'm going to create a model, and the what's going to follow it is the name of the model. So let's say I want a dog model, right? So I'm going to write Rails generate dog, and what fields do what attributes do I want the dog to have? let's say I want it to have a name and an owner. And both of those I want to store as strings. I'm going to do name, the name of the field, which happens to be name, and say it's a string, space, and let's say another field, right? Name, or I wanted the name of the owner, which is a string. And let's say I want age, that's an integer. I just added age right now, just to show you like that we could have different types. And I'm gonna run this generation. And now we wait. So now let's look at what this Rails generator has provided me. It invoked active record and created this file in db/migrate called create dogs, and also created in our apps folder under our model subdirectory a dog.rb. Right now we're going to ignore what these tests are and just focus on the two files that are created. So first off, I'm going to look at what dog.rb is. So I'm just going to pop open my text editor. And here we go. I look in apps, I look in models, and I see dog.rb. And it looks like there's nothing there right now. So it looks like I created just something called dog. And it inherits from this class called active record base. So any kind of model that you define within Ruby that has like a database table associated with it is going to inherit from active record base, and it's going to give you a bunch of methods that make it very convenient for you to access your table, like your all the information in your database, and allow you to use this class to store it. All right. Now I'm going to go to the migration files. I go to my DB folder, I go to migrate, and I open this migration folder. So what I'm going to start with is, what is a migration? A migration are deltas to your database. They don't inherently represent like the sum of all your migrations represents your current database. A migration simply says, I'm going to make this change. It's like a log of changes. So let's see. I have this migration called create dogs. The name is very arbitrary, and it inherits from active record migration. That's all your migrations will have to inherit from this active record migration. And the first thing it defines is a change, which will be ran when I run this migration. But let's observe this change. First method is create table dogs. And what it's going to do is say, hey, I want in my database, whatever database I'm using, I'm going to create this table called dogs, right? And within dogs, and within this dogs table, I'm going to create a string column that's called name, string column called owner, and an integer column called age. And this exactly matches up with the Rails generate model dog name owner. It matches up with the inputs I gave earlier. So we create this table called dogs, and notice that the table is called dogs, which is the plural of dog. And this is just Rails convention where your model is singular, but like the name of your table, your controller, your views, all these subdirectories are all the pluralized form. And that's just something to watch out for. And right now, you could, right now, I've not migrated these changes. I'm defining what changes I need to make to the database, right? So the question is, how do I actually tell Rails to make this, to request this change to the database? And this is from running the command rake db migrate. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with what make files are. Make files are just basically kind of like scripts that you run, and the scripts will just do a bunch of logic like compile files for you, stuff like that. What rake is Ruby make, and it's gonna run this script that's called dbmigrate. And what dbmigrate does, it's gonna look through your migrations file, and anything it has not migrated, it will migrate. So after I run this command, it's going to do this delta. It's going to do this change. It's going to create this table dogs, add all these columns, and yeah. So when I run rake dbmigrate, we wait for it, and it will tell us, oh, it created this table called dogs. Now, what can we do now? If I do Rails console, I open up basically my Rails application without all its views, right? I use within it, I could have a dog class, or the dog model, right? If I do this, it says, oh, it basically says it exists, right? When I do dog.new, I create an instance of the dog. So you could see in the output, I do this, I have this dog object where its ID is nil, name's nil, owner's nil, age is nil, created at is nil, updated is nil. Like, this dog has all these fields on it, but how does the dog know it has a name? How does the dog know it has an owner? How does the dog know it has an age? Like, how does this dog model, which is defined here, this class active record, this dog that inherits from active record base, even though I've got like nothing in here, it's pretty much an empty class, how does it know that it has like all these fields like in the database? It's what Rails, it's just a bunch of Rails magic that it does inference. It's going to say, hey, I have a dog class that inherits from record base. That means I have a plural of dogs table within my database. And I'm going to go look at the database. I'm going to see it has all these columns called name, owner, age. And then every time when I create a new dog, it's going to have all these fields, name, owner, age, and created at and updated at are just basically given in that are just automatically added to the tables with Ruby on Rails. And the last thing that's noted is ID. ID is what we call the primary key. It makes every dog that's saved into our database, right, is unique by this ID. So there could be two dogs in our database with the same name, but what makes them different is their IDs. All right, so now we're going to start running what we call basic queries. So let's say I want to see all the dogs in my database, right? I'm going to do dog.all. And it's going to basically run this query. It's going to select from the dogs table that with basically it'll grab all its fields. And right now I have this empty record relation. This is an array of all the dogs I found, and I didn't find any because I've never like inserted a dog yet. So how do I do that? First, in my Ruby environment, I'm going to store within this variable called d a new dog, right? So right now d is this empty dog, and what I could do is access its .name, and let's say I set it to Fido, right? If I look at the dog again, I can inspect to see that its name is now Fido. I do d.owner equals Howard. Now, when I inspect it again, it has both the name saved and the owner. So now we have this floating dog object in our Ruby environment. But let's look at the database again. I do dog.all, I'm going to make a query for all the dogs and grab all its fields. I see that, again, the active record relation has nothing in it. It's an empty array. What hasn't happened yet is I haven't inserted this dog into my database. So this dog exists in my Ruby environment, but I have to manually say, hey, I want to grab this dog and put it in this database. And what I want to do then is do D, which is my dog object, and call .save on it. And what .save does is this, says, hey, if this is a new dog, aka if like its ID is empty, I'm gonna insert it into the database. But if it's if it already exists, I'm gonna just update the fields. And you could see when you call .save this transaction, right? It says insert into our dogs table the fields name and owner with the values of name being Fido and the owner value being Howard. Now, when I do dog.all, I'm going to see all the dogs in my database. So now I have a dog within my database with ID 1, name Fido, owner Howard. That's the dog I just created, right? And if I check my D again, I could see that it now has an ID. So once something's inserted into a database, it has an ID to it. Now, just for fun, we could create another dog. Let's do d2 equals dog.new. So calling dog.new, I say I'm going to create an instance of a dog class. I'm going to say d.2.name equals Bob. d.2.owner equals Charles. And I call d.2.save. And what we'll do is insert this new dog into my database. So when I do dog.all, I can see that I've got dog 1 right here in this array and dog 2 right here with all the information like Bob, with its name being Bob and its owner being Charles. And something cool you can do for the dog model is called dog.count. And what it will do is return the number of dogs or like number of rows in your dogs table in your database, and it's 2 because I just inserted 2 dogs, right? So one thing I want to note is the difference between like having an instance like this dog and this dog, this overall dog model. This overall dog model, like with the capital D, is it's this Ruby. It's like a class that allows you to do like a lot of database operations and stuff like that. While an instance of it, when you call dog.new, what it'll return you is an instance which is like an actual dog object rather than this class, this overall class that does queries for you. All right, moving on. Now, we have this dog.all. We have 2 dogs in it. And let's say I want to edit some information on this, right? I could say dog.find 1. Okay, let me break this down for you. So first, I'm using the dog class, right? I'm saying .find. What .find does is it'll make a query and grab me a dog. And the argument you put in is an integer or whatever the primary ID is, and for us, it's integers, right? So when I do dog.find 1, it's going to look for the dog that has the ID 1. So I'm going to assign that to D3, and it's going to make this query select dogs from dogs where ID is 1. And when I get back D3, it is the dog with ID 1, and it's the first dog I made, named Fido. I'm the owner. And now we could make some changes to it. Let's say I do D3, the owner equals Charles. I can't spell Charles apparently. Now D3 says, hey, the dog's ID is 1, name is Fido, the owner is Charles, right? But when I do dog.all and make the query to the database, it looks like dog of ID's 1's name is Fido still, but its owner is still Howard. And what is happening is that I have D3, which is in my Ruby kind of environment, but I have not said, oh, this dog in my Ruby environment, take your information and make changes to the database. So to make those changes, I have to call d3.save. And when I make that save, it's going to return me either true or false. What this Boolean represents is if the transition is successful. And since I don't have any validations, which is a topic we'll cover later, it's always going to be true. So my transition was successful. Now when I do dog.all, I'm going to see that the dog with ID 1's name is Fido, but its owner is now Charles. I've actually committed that change to my database. And if we say, let's say we have like let's create one more dog just to show you what happens when you don't save something. New e.name equals gone, right? So now I have this dog in my Ruby environment, no ID, its name's gone, but I haven't saved it yet, right? So what I'm gonna do is exit my Rails console and reopen my Rails console. Since my environment went down, like my Ruby application went down, and I spun it back up, when I try D, it can't find anything because it disappeared. None of that data persisted. But when I do dog.all, the 2 dogs that I saved are still in my database right here. My 2 dogs, Fido and Bob. So I could say, oh, Fido equals dog.find1. And now I have loaded up Fido in my environment. So this is how you use your model classes to look stuff up in your database. All right, I'm going to pause this really quickly.